The letter arrived on a morning that felt heavier than the snow outside the apartment windows. Evan Cross stared at it for a long moment before opening it, as if delaying the truth might soften the impact. At 41, he had learned that bad news rarely announced itself loudly. It slipped in quietly, wrapped in formality. The notice was brief. Final warning. Lease termination. Vacate within 30 days. Evan folded the paper once, then again, his movements slow, controlled. Panic wasted energy. He had learned that lesson long ago. The apartment was small, cold, and sparsely furnished, the kind of place meant for temporary stays that somehow became permanent. A duffel bag sat near the door, never fully unpacked. Against the far wall lay Atlas, his Belgian Malinois muzzle graying, body stiff with age but eyes still sharp. At 11 years old, Atlas rose carefully, joints protesting as he crossed the floor and rested his head against Evan's knee. Evan placed a hand on the dog's neck, fingers sinking into familiar fur. Atlas had been there for every deployment, every extraction. Every night Evan woke gasping for air long after the war had ended. Civilian life hadn't suited him. Employers wanted calm, predictable men. Evan lived in a constant state of readiness. Loud noises tightened his chest. Crowded rooms stole his breath. He wasn't dangerous, just incompatible. Jobs ended quietly. Friendships faded. Family existed mostly as unanswered phone numbers. Atlas was the only constant, the only thing that still trusted him without question. Later that day, while sorting through old documents he no longer remembered keeping, Evan found an envelope thicker than the rest. The paper was yellowed, the handwriting precise. Inside was a deed. An inheritance. His grandfather's name sat at the top, a man Evan had barely known. Samuel Cross had been described as brilliant by some, unstable by others. A scientist obsessed with environmental systems, isolation and long-term survival. They hadn't spoken in years before Samuel died, and Evan had assumed there was nothing left to inherit. The property listed was unusual. A cabin deep in the northern mountains. No utilities. No road access. No recent inspections. The kind of place most people avoided. Evan pulled up the coordinates on his phone. The signal lagged, then revealed a vast stretch of wilderness swallowed by snow and elevation. The image stirred something unfamiliar in his chest. Not hope. Recognition. Atlas lifted his head, ears twitching as if sensing the shift. Evan exhaled slowly. He wasn't searching for peace. He wasn't running toward freedom. He was looking for a place that didn't require him to explain himself. Somewhere the rules were simple. Endure or leave. He folded the deed carefully and slipped it into his jacket. Outside, the wind pressed against the building, patient and unrelenting. Evan met Atlas's gaze and nodded once. "Looks like we're going," he said quietly. The dog's tail thumped against the floor, steady and sure, as if the decision had already been made. The drive north felt less like travel and more like withdrawal. Evan left the city before dawn, streets empty, traffic lights blinking pointlessly at intersections no one used. Buildings thinned, then disappeared, replaced by dark tree lines and snow-covered shoulders of road. The truck hummed steadily beneath him, old but reliable, the kind of machine that did its job without complaint. In the back seat, Atlas lay on a folded blanket, breathing slow, eyes tracking the passing world through the glass. His movements were stiff now, careful, but his attention never dulled. As elevation increased, the air sharpened. Snow thickened, swallowing sound until even the engine felt muted. Evan's hands stayed firm on the wheel, but his shoulders tightened. The terrain triggered memories his mind hadn't invited. Open spaces. Limited exits. He adjusted his breathing without thinking, grounding himself in the rhythm of the road. Atlas lifted his head once, ears angling forward, sensing the change. "Easy," Evan murmured, unsure who the words were meant for. The coordinates led him off the main road and onto a narrow trail nearly hidden beneath snow. Tire tracks vanished quickly behind him, erased by wind. When his phone lost signal, Evan didn't reach for it. Silence settled in, deep and complete. After nearly an hour, the forest opened just enough to reveal the cabin. It sat low against the slope, half-buried, dark wood blending seamlessly with the trees. The roof pitched steeply, designed to shed snow. No decorations. No signs of abandonment. It didn't look welcoming, but it looked deliberate. Like it had been waiting. Evan cut the engine and stepped out. Cold bit immediately, clean and sharp. Atlas followed more slowly, hopping down with effort and pausing to steady himself. Inside the air felt different. Not warm but balanced. So, the interior was simple. Built-in shelves. A stone-set stove. Thick walls that swallowed sound instead of echoing it. Evan moved cautiously, testing the floor, the walls, the door seams. Everything had been placed with intention. Nothing wasted. Atlas circled once, then lowered himself near the wall, releasing a long breath. The tension in Evan's chest eased slightly at the sight. As daylight faded, a knock came at the door. Evan froze. Atlas's ears lifted, body still. Evan opened it to find two locals standing back from the threshold, bundled in heavy coats. Their eyes scanned the cabin quickly, assessing. "Didn't expect anyone up here," the man said. "Winter's rough this year." Evan met his gaze. "I'm not visiting." The woman exhaled softly. "Most don't last," she replied. They left without another word, disappearing into the trees. That night, wind tested the walls. The cabin held. Evan lay awake, listening, cataloging sounds. Wood shifting. Air moving. Not threats. Systems. Atlas slept nearby, steady and warm. For the first time in months, Evan didn't feel hunted by silence. He felt contained by it. As snow pressed in from all sides, he realized the cabin wasn't meant to keep the world out. It was built to hold someone together while the world did its worst. The storm arrived without warning, not with fury but with certainty. Snow thickened until the world beyond the windows dissolved into white. Wind pressed against the cabin in steady waves, testing rather than attacking. Evan adjusted the stove methodically, feeding it slow, measured fuel. The warmth gathered reluctantly, as if the cabin demanded patience before reward. Atlas shifted restlessly, joints stiffening as the temperature dropped. Evan knelt beside him, rubbing warmth into his legs, murmuring quiet reassurances learned in places far harsher than this. A sound cut through the wind. Not weather. Not wood. A knock. Atlas's head lifted, a low warning vibrating in his chest. Evan opened the door to a woman barely standing, snow clinging to her coat and lashes. She introduced herself as Lena, voice thin but steady. Her car had failed miles away. She had followed a faint light through the storm. Evan didn't hesitate. He brought her inside, wrapped her in blankets, gave her warmth before questions. Atlas sniffed once, then lay down calm. Permission given. As the night deepened, the storm worsened. The power failed. The cold pressed harder. Evan noticed the heat moving unevenly, pooling where it shouldn't. Remembering his grandfather's reputation, he searched beneath a loose floor panel and found a sealed journal. Inside were diagrams, airflow paths, notes written with surgical precision. This cabin wasn't meant to fight the cold. It was meant to store warmth, release it slowly, survive long sieges. Evan and Lena worked quietly, adjusting vents, shifting thermal mass, following the system exactly. The temperature stabilized. Atlas's breathing eased. Before dawn, more knocking came. Neighbors, families, elderly couples wrapped in desperation. Their heaters had failed. Roads were gone. Evan organized them calmly, rotating shelter, managing heat, assigning tasks. No speeches. No heroics. Just competence. The cabin strained but held. By morning, the storm weakened. Everyone was alive. Days later, a county official arrived, paperwork in hand, prepared to enforce rules. He left with softened eyes and a delayed deadline. The community returned with supplies, firewood, medicine for Atlas. Apologies came quietly, if at all. They weren't needed. What mattered was understanding. Spring arrived slowly. Snow receded. The land softened. Evan slept through the night more often. Atlas walked slower but without pain. Lena stayed longer than planned. Together they reinforced the cabin, honoring the system that had saved them all. Standing outside one evening, Evan realized the shock wasn't what he found inside the cabin. It was what the cabin revealed in him. He hadn't lost his purpose. It had been waiting, stored like warmth, until the right moment to be released.